Thank you. Mr. President, we are thrilled to have you here today to be with America's finest young people. This administration has put in place some very important initiatives that have improved our fight against crime. Violent crime in America is at a 7-year low as a result of more cops on the beat, as a result of trying to help with education, with after-school programs and preschool programs, and more teachers in the classroom, and trying to improve classroom buildings. But this has also been a tough time for America's youth. We've had Columbine in Colorado. We have students here from Jonesboro, Arkansas, and from Springfield, Oregon, who have firsthand knowledge of the problems of violence that still exist throughout our communities in America. Columbine happened many months ago. The President met with many of us and other citizens and put together legislation that is still sitting in the Congress. We hope, Mr. President, that before too many more weeks, we can get that legislation out of conference and onto the floor and passed. Things like gun safety measures and help for youth after school, and programs in regard to juvenile justice that need to be done and completed. All the members of Congress here are dedicated to that effort. I was in Columbine on the Sunday after the tragedy for the memorial service. I was there with Vice President Gore and Colin Powell. We stood in a room for an hour and a half and greeted the parents of the children who had been killed. As you might expect, it was a very tough occasion. As each of the parents came through, we hugged them, cried with them. One woman I held for about a minute in my arms as she shook uncontrollably with anguish over the tragedy in her life. She finally got her composure and she stepped back from me, and she had a picture of her daughter who had been killed. And she said, "Congressman, please go back to Washington and try to do something so that my daughter did not die in vain." I'll never forget her, and I'll never forget her message to me. We are here today, you are here with us today, to try to come up with better answers. You have the answers, and we stand ready to listen to you so that no more children have to die in vain. I had a police officer in Chicago recently who told me that he goes to 3 funerals a week in Chicago. He said, "When will it end?" It has to end. You can make a difference. You can help us with what can make a difference. We are dedicated. This president is dedicated. The members are dedicated to trying to do something. We can't do it all. We can't even do half of it, but we can help. And we're dedicated to do that. It's now my honor to present a young lady who's here from Tennessee. She's a leader. She's not only talked about these problems, but she's tried to lead efforts in Hillsborough High School in Tennessee to try to make a difference in her community. We're thrilled to have her here today, Rebecca Hunter of Tennessee.
morning. My name is Rebecca Hunter, and I'm from Hillsborough High School in Nashville, Tennessee, the alma mater of Congressman Bob Clement. The day after the shooting at Columbine High School, my American Studies class discussed ways we could help the Columbine students deal with their grief and cope with the terrible tragedy they had experienced. We concluded that there wasn't a lot we could do for Columbine, but there was a lot that we could do to make sure that tragedies like Columbine didn't happen again. We decided that the best way to prevent this from happening again was to make sure that there weren't any students who were outcast, who felt cut off from the larger community. As a result, we came up with the I Will Pledge. Our pledge reads, as part of the community, I will. I will pledge to be a part of the solution. I will eliminate taunting from my own behavior. I will encourage others to do the same. I will do my part to make my school a safe place by being more sensitive to others. I will set the example of a caring individual. I will eliminate profanity towards others from my language. I will not let my words or actions hurt others, and if others won't become part of the solution, I will. We put this pledge into effect the Monday after the Columbine shooting. By Thursday, over 1,100 students at Hillsborough had signed the pledge. We put the pledge on a website, and within 2 weeks, the pledge was implemented by 40 schools across the country. Today, over 500 schools have implemented the pledge, and it is growing each day. Young people are getting involved and taking control of our destiny. We have been urged to action by horrible events like those at Columbine, but we have also been inspired by the leadership of President Clinton. Our president has dedicated himself to empowering the local communities and young people to fight the epidemic of youth violence and has played an important role in bringing the issue to the top of the national agenda. He has also inspired our generation to get involved and to volunteer our time and energy to make our schools and communities better places. All Americans owe him our thanks for working to make sure that our country takes the necessary steps to ensure that we can really work to reduce violence in our communities, especially among young people. It is my great honor to introduce to you a real leader in this effort, President Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. I think Rebecca Hunter did a wonderful job with her pledge and with her introduction, don't you? Let's give her another hand. I thought she was great. I would like to begin by thanking our House Democratic leader, Dick Gephardt, and all others who were involved in this Voices Against Violence meeting. I want to thank Congressman Frost, Bonnier, DeLauro, Clement, and Menendez, who are over here to my left, and I see Representative Capps out there. There may be more members of Congress here. I thank all of them for being here. I would like to thank our Secretary of Education, Dick Riley, who came with me, Jeff Bleich, who runs our national grassroots campaign against youth violence, and I'd like to thank Ananda Lewis of MTV and all the other organizations who are working to help make this a safer place for all of you. I thank the parents, the teachers, and the chaperones who came here with you today. But most of all, I came here to say thank you to all of you for taking responsibility, taking a stand, and raising your voices against violence. I also have to say that this is a good day for me for you to be here because I know a lot of you have been trained in conflict resolution. And I'm meeting with the leaders of the Congress this afternoon, the Republicans and the Democrats, to try to resolve our conflict over the budget. And if I don't do so well, I may keep some of you in Washington for an extra day or two to help me. I think that would be a good idea. Actually, we do agree on things from time to time. Later today, I'm going to sign legislation that will make good our common commitment to veterans, housing, science, and technology, and to a part of what I call my New Markets Initiative to give economic opportunity to the poor parts of America where our recovery has not reached. And now we have to finish the rest of the budget. The most important thing to me and to all of us is that we do a good job on education. It has got to be the #1 priority for our country for the new century. We have the largest and most diverse student population we have ever had. It poses new challenges for us, but it gives America an unprecedented opportunity. So I want you to see what we want to do about youth violence in the larger context of what I believe should be our commitment to give you the best possible education and the best possible future that any children have ever had in the history of our country. We're trying to put 100,000 teachers in our classrooms for smaller classes. We're trying to build or modernize 6,000 schools because so many kids are in house trailers and broken down old schools today because there's so many more school children than we've ever had before. We're trying to make sure that by the end of next year we have hooked up every classroom in America to the internet. We're trying to provide funds for summer school and after-school programs, funds to turn around schools that aren't doing a good job, more efforts to mentor young people in middle school to get them ready to go on to college. We're also fighting for funds for health care and the environment and for more community police officers. And we're doing it in a way that will enable us to do something else you should care about, which is to save Social Security and Medicare when the so-called baby boom generation retires, and then there'll only be about 2 people your age working for every 1 person retired. And it's very important that we use this moment here where we're prosperous to protect your future. Most of us who are in the baby boom generation are panicked with the thought that when we retire, we'll impose a big burden on your generation and your ability to raise our kids. So we're determined to avoid that, and we can. And finally, let me say, from the time I was your age until today, our country has always been in debt, and over the last 10 or 12 years, increasingly so, before I became president. We've got a chance to get this country out of debt over the next 15 years to make America debt-free for the first time since 1835, and I hope we will do that. Now, I've been asking all the American people, including our young people, to imagine the future and to recognize that our country has a certain unique moment here when we've got a lot of prosperity and when our problems have been laid bare for us for all to see by tragic instances like the instance at Columbine. But it's not the only kind of violence young people are subjected to. They're also subjected to hate crimes. Matthew Shepard being killed in Wyoming, the children shot at the Jewish Community Center, and then the Filipino postal worker murdered, the young Korean killed in the Middle West by the guy on the hate crime spree who also killed the African-American former basketball coach at Northwestern. And so when you have all these opportunities out there and you have your problems laid bare and you have the strength of the country and the prosperity of the country giving us the confidence to deal with them, what I hope you will say to everybody here and when you go back home is, America will never have a better time to face its biggest problems. America will never have a better time to try to save all of its children. And that is what I think we ought to be thinking about. You heard Congressman Gebhardt say that our crime rate's been going down 7 years in a row. That's the first time that's happened for over 40 years. The overall crime rate is lowest it's been in 26 years. The murder rate's the lowest it's been in more than 30 years. That sounds great, and I'm proud of that, and I'm glad we've worked on that. But does anybody think America is as safe as it ought to be? No. Of course not. I mean, of course, obviously. 6 months after Columbine, tomorrow, 6 months after Columbine, no serious person believes that America is as safe as it ought to be. And every day we lose more than a dozen kids to violence. They die in ones and twos, so we don't see them on the evening news. We don't see them, their names blared in headlines. So why don't you help us adopt a real goal. Why don't we together say that we're going to make America the safest big country in the world in the 21st century, starting with making our children safe? You can do that, and that's what I want to do. We need an organized way in every community in America to capture the spirit that brought you to Washington this week. We need people working on specific things. I thought Rebecca Hunter's pledge was great. You just think about it. If every young person in every high school and junior high school in America took the pledge that she stated and acted on it, violence would go down. At least violence perpetrated by young people would go down. I want you to help us while you're here. What else can we do? How do we make our schools sanctuaries of safety? How do we recognize the early warning signs of violence? How do we teach people to resolve their differences peacefully? How do we share good ideas from one community to another? How can people who are injured find it in their hearts to forgive people they've been angry at instead of trying to get even? These are very important questions. It seems to me there is no quick fix solution. And what we have to do in Washington is to try to give you the tools and the framework and the safe possible conditions to do this work. But our young people have to be reached one by one. In many ways, all of you can have more influence on your peers than I can as president or than any of us can. We can try, but you can make all the difference. I also would like to say that I think that this conference has to recognize that there are things that you can do and things that we have to do, and that we have some obligations here to understand the problem of youth violence in the environment of the greater violent level of our community. And let me just mention a few things. Mr. Gebhardt mentioned a couple of them before, but when I took office almost 7 years ago now, I had spent a lot of time going from community to community, walking the street with police officers and with community leaders, sitting and listening to young people talk about the violence in their streets. I'll never forget, I was in California one time, this is way 8 or 9 years ago, and this young person in a grade school told me what it was like when they had a drive-by shooting at random and all the kids had to get out of their desk and hit the floor. And so I'd listen to people talk to me about this stuff. And I asked the Congress to do what the local people told me would help to lower crime. So we put more community policing programs out there. We passed the Brady bill. We banned assault weapons. We did a lot of things that were good. And we supported local community initiatives. We had a zero tolerance for guns in schools policy. And as I said, it is working, and that is good. But now I think we have to do some more things. I also should say that all these people here in our caucus who supported all those crime policies took a lot of heat for doing it, because we were told that the NRA told everybody we were going to take their guns away and they couldn't go hunting anymore. Well, everybody's still hunting, but it's a safer country. And we're still having the same argument up here. We held the first ever school safety conference at the White House. And we gave over $100 million in safe school grants to schools and communities to help them fight youth violence. We started mentoring programs to help kids know that if they stayed in school and stayed out of trouble, they could actually go on to college. And after the terrible wave of violence culminating in Columbine, I launched a new White House Youth Violence Council to coordinate our work throughout all the government agencies. Now, today, we are going to release at the government level, this makes the very point I made to you in the beginning about why I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to release our second annual report on school safety. The Secretary of Education has done wonderful work on this. It shows that once again, the vast majority of our schools are safe. It also shows they're getting safer, which is a tribute to you and to your teachers. Homicides in schools remain rare. Crimes are down both in and out of schools, and there are now far fewer students carrying weapons to schools than there were 6 years ago. That's the good news. The bad news is we've had Columbine, Jonesboro, Springfield, Pearl. I could go on and on, all the places where there have been these horrible examples of school violence. We know that more and more students feel unsafe. So I want to say to you that, I want you to help us with new ideas, but I want to tell you what we're doing now up here. And then I want to close and ask you to think about something for the rest of the time you're here. First of all, we want to do more to help you reach other people. Our Justice Department and the Education Department worked with MTV to provide a youth action guide and a CD that focus on concrete steps to reduce youth violence, such as mentoring, conflict resolution, and youth advocacy. I want to thank the Recording Industry Association of America for their help in putting this CD together. We've already distributed over 250,000, over 250,000 of these CDs. Today, the Justice Department is going to send out 200,000 more to organizations around the country, after-school programs, law enforcement agencies, foundations, and civic groups. Now, this CD basically sounds a call for action. It's a common-sense tool that helps to make a difference if it's put in the right hands, the hands of people like you. And we're doing our part. But let me also say, to again echo what Mr. Gebhardt said, we need Congress to help us. Especially, we need Congress to help us to keep guns out of the wrong hands. Now, I've heard all this talk where people say it doesn't really matter whether we do anything about guns. All I know is we passed the Brady bill. We've kept 400,000 people with criminal backgrounds from buying handguns since 1994. And we have the lowest crime rate in 26 years. I don't believe the things are unrelated. And one of the real problems with the Brady bill is there is a loophole. If you buy a gun at a gun show or an urban flea market, they don't have to do a background check on you. So we want to close that. We also want to ban the import of large ammunition clips, and we want to require child safety locks. Let me just give you this statistic to think about, since you want to be against unintentional violence as well as intentional violence. The accidental death rate of children from guns in America, the accidental death rate, listen to this, is 9 times higher than the rate for the next 25 biggest industrial countries combined. You take the next 25 biggest economies and put them all together, our accidental death rate from guns is 9 times higher than all of them put together. So we should do more to create an environment in which we will be more safe. That will help you when you're trying to get kids to sign the pledge, when you're trying to solve the conflicts in your schools. I also believe it's very important for Congress to pass this hate crimes legislation, which makes it explicitly criminal to attack people because of their racial, their religious, or their sexual orientation. I think it is very, very important. Now, last night, the Republicans on the relevant committees removed important hate crimes protection from a bill that had already passed the Senate. And they tried to kill this bill when we weren't watching, but now we're watching this morning. I want to ask you also to speak up for that. That's the last point I want to make. This hate crimes legislation is important because why? It embodies what I think is the biggest challenge facing not only our society, but societies all over the world. You know, the great thing about the modern world is we got a lot of movement across national borders. A lot of you have probably been on the internet talking to people in other countries. And when I look ahead to your future, I see a time when we'll have these unbelievable scientific discoveries. And your children literally may be born with a life expectancy of about 100 years. We're unlocking the secrets of the human gene. And you will be literally able to not only be American citizens, but citizens of the world in ways that no one else has ever been, even if you don't travel beyond your home county because of the way the internet is working to bring us together. That's the good news. The bad news is that the same demons that lead people to commit racial and religious and sexual orientation-related crimes and discrimination in America are sweeping the world in more violent ways. Basically, the conflict in Northern Ireland is a religious conflict. The conflict in the Middle East is an ethnic and religious conflict. The conflicts in Kosovo and Bosnia were ethnic and religious conflicts. The brutal killings in Africa were tribal conflicts. All over the world, people are getting into modern technology, but they're behaving as if they lived 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 years ago because they're afraid of people who are different from them still. Don't you think that's interesting that you live in the most modern of all worlds, and yet the biggest problem we've got is the oldest problem of human society, people being scared of people who are different from them. And you can help that. I had last week at the White House, really my wife had this meeting and I just went along for the ride, but she sponsored this lecture by a man who helped to create the infrastructure of the internet and a man who knows more than nearly anybody in America about the Human Genome Project, the breaking down of the component parts of the genes and how it fits in the body. And they talked about how we were going to be able to solve all these health problems by merging computer technology and what we know about genetics. But let me tell you what the genome specialist said. He said, now listen to this, look around this room, all the different kinds of people that are in this room. He said that 99.9% of each of our bodies is identical to the other. We are 99.9% the same genetically. Even more interesting, he said, if you take two ethnic groups, there are more differences in the gene structures within the ethnic groups than there are between the ethnic groups. That is, if you take, let's say, a group of Hispanic kids and a group of Asian kids, there will be more differences within the group than once you average out what the genetic makeup is between the Hispanics and the Asians. We are getting a message here. Science is reaffirming what our values tell us. And I'm telling you, if you all can do something about violence and fear and the compulsive alienation of so many of our young people, which turns into their need to look down on people and eventually dehumanize them and eventually think it's okay to act violently against them, if you can deal with that, it's the oldest problem of human society. If you can deal with that, you're going to have the brightest future of any generation of Americans. You will have a chance to solve diseases, to solve poverty problems, to give people potentials that they never would have had before. But the whole thing can be held down by the failure to deal with our violent impulses, which are the product of our most deep-seated fears. So think about that. If you want to live in the new world of the 21st century, you got to help people get rid of their old hatreds and old fears. We'll do our part, and we're very proud of your leadership in doing yours. Thank you, and God bless you.